I'm John Bommarito. This is Acoustic Alternatives from Grove Studios in Ypsilanti. Grove Studios is a place that if you're in the Ann Arbor, Detroit area, and you're looking for a place to practice, if you've got a band or maybe you're a DJ or maybe you're a podcaster like I am, it's a place that you can rent 24/7, keypad operation, and they've been very kind to me in the last couple of years and letting me do my podcast here. I guess anybody can do the podcast here, not letting me do the podcast here, but introducing me to the idea, and I'm really grateful for them because otherwise I don't get to visit with some of my favorite singer-songwriters and expose the world to them and learn a little bit more about them. And one of those is Chuck Brodsky, and he's here today. Hello, Chuck.
Hi, John.
Good to see you again. It's been a long time.
It is, but it's great to be back.
I should have looked at the last session we did together in Ann Arbor, but I didn't do that this time. But it's been at least, I'm going to say 8 years or something ridiculous like that. But most of my CDs in your collection that I own are signed, so there's just a few that have come out since then, this one and this one and this one. And we're going to talk a bit about your latest record and your back story, too. Do like to start with a song, however, because you are here to play music. So I think it's going to be something from the new album, is it not?
It is. It's the title track, in fact.
All right, Chuck Brodsky on Acoustic Alternatives.
Just a simple song about a couple of wings, about gravity and its effect on things. With just one wing, you go flapping around, but should never be able to get off of the ground. Takes two wings, maybe a prayer, if you do take off, just to stay in the air. Whether you start from here or you start from there, takes two wings to go anywhere. Takes two wings, or it won't fly straight, it'll just stay stuck in a figure eight. Points of view we can debate, but it takes two wings or it won't fly straight. With two wings you can look down at the angry mob terrorizing the town, and you might see things like you never could. With two wings you might even see some good. Takes two wings, a leap of faith, a little respect, and a touch of grace. It takes trust, luck and skill. Takes two wings and a little goodwill. Just a simple song about a couple of wings, about gravity and heavy things. You'll have your scrapes and you'll get your dings, but if it's gonna fly, it takes two wings. If it's gonna fly, it takes two wings. It takes trust, some luck and skill. It takes two wings and a little goodwill. Takes two wings and a little goodwill. Takes two wings and a little.
Chuck Brodsky on Acoustic Alternatives. It Takes Two Wings. The album's called Gravity, Wings, and Heavy Things. The title is mentioned in that song, and it's available on this album in two versions. Piano, originally your first instrument. Is that not true?
It is true. I started playing piano when I was a toddler, And my parents saw this, my aunt, my grandparents saw this, and so I was encouraged and started playing, just, gravitating towards it and pushing keys and trying to establish little melodies. And so the family decided to enroll me in piano lessons when I was 5 years old, and I took them throughout most of my grade school years, although I don't think I really use any of what I learned there, honestly, but I did learn to play by ear as a little kid, and my very first gigs in my life, probably the first 10 of them, when I went to university, were all exclusively on piano, because I didn't start playing guitar until that time, until college. And when I got one, well, even before I got one, I understood I needed to get one. I understood that it would have been pretty impossible back in those days to be a traveling musician, piano-playing songwriter, because digital pianos hadn't been invented yet, and the condition of each piano, venue to venue, really would vary. Sometimes they'd be horribly out of tune. Sometimes keys wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And I just understood immediately, literally first day of university, that I needed to get a guitar and I needed to switch over to it, and it was going to be a very long-term proposition, years and years, put myself on a 10-year plan. And then as I traveled, moved around a bit too, it wasn't possible to own a piano. A couple of times I was able to rent one for short periods of time, but I went many, many years without being able to play one consistently, and I lost my confidence and some of my skills. And then the pandemic hit, and I had 2 whole years to be home playing my digital piano, and I got comfortable on it again, and now I'm just going for it. I'm trying to do a couple or a few songs on piano every show, and I hope to even expand on that in the future.
Some of the venues you show up to must have pianos. Like, I know some of the venues I go to just have a house piano.
Yeah, and some of them have very nice pianos, but at this point, I think I prefer playing the digital pianos just because there's a consistency, especially if I can play my own and bring it with me.
Yeah.
The one I own weighs 24 pounds, so it's very easy. And that way I get the same playability, the same tones. Everything's familiar about it. And for a guitar player to have to suddenly play a show with somebody else's guitar, it's the same principle. You would have to make adjustments on the fly, piano to piano to piano. And so even when they have really beautiful pianos in a venue, I still, more often than not, would bring my own digital and tend to want to play that.
Comfort.
Comfort is entirely what I'm after. Because if I'm comfortable, then I'm free.
Yeah. Then it'll come out good.
Yeah.
Well, we were briefly touching on your 5-year-old self. I'd like to stay in that part of your life for a little bit to talk about your childhood growing up in Philly, because you're wearing the Phillies hat.
Yes.
Clearly, well, this is recording on day 2 of the World Series. They haven't played yet, but so far the Phillies are leading 1-0. You grew up in Philadelphia as one of how many kids? Are you?
There were 3 of us.
3 of you? Okay.
Yeah, I was the oldest.
And did you have an influence on the others, or was it kind of the parents kind of led you to music?
I don't know that I had an influence on my sisters, certainly not musically. One of my sisters took guitar lessons for a couple years, but I think guitar is an exceptionally difficult instrument for a kid. You don't get the same kind of instant gratification that you can get on a piano. Mm-hmm. You can just simply press one key and enjoy the sound of that key, or press 2 keys together. But the pain involved on your fingertips, building up your calluses, and if your starter guitar has high action and is very difficult to play, you can't make nice sounds. Even a pro can't make nice sounds on a guitar with really high action. So I think that causes a lot of kids to give up too early, and it caused my sister to give up a bit early. My other sister just never was musically inclined, but one of them became a fantastic artist and ceramicist and is doing really well professionally with that.
Nice.
So, I was the odd duck. The cool thing is, though, I have a niece that is a very, very accomplished classical musician and composer, and she's young. She's in her 20s. But she was recognized as young as 14, her compositions were performed by adult orchestras, and she taught at Interlochen at the age of 16, so I paved the way, and for her, being a musician was not a case of her being a black sheep, like it was with me initially. I won everybody in my family over, but with her, she had that uncle that had blazed the trail before her, and so music was already an acceptable profession. And so it's really wonderful to see. I've encouraged her and been in a position to draw out the the improvisational skills, and have had her sit in with me a few times live, and I've had her play on 2 out of my last 3 CDs.
Nice. Very cool.
It's fun to be in that position to offer her an opportunity to stretch her out a little.
Cool. What kind of things did you do as a kid to keep busy besides poking around on the piano? Did you have other hobbies?
Well, I was really into sports, and we lived across the street from a junior high school. We lived on a corner, and there were ball fields across the street on both sides. There was a blacktop parking lot that I could roller skate on and play street hockey on. There were tennis courts across the street that we could play street hockey and roller hockey on. And so there was always something going on one of those fields, whether it was people my age playing that I could join in, or adults playing, but there was always activity around. And, that was an era where kids were free to say, "Bye, Mom, I'm going out.
Come back when the streetlights are on."
Yeah, kind of thing. So
yeah, I'm a little younger than you, but
so I explored. Just got on my bike and rode and entertained myself and found things to do, and yeah, it was great. It was great. I think it was a pretty ideal situation for a young kid.
Did you ever break anything that would have affected your ability to play piano or guitar?
No, fortunately. I never broke a bone until I had a motorcycle accident in my young 30s. And that was a ankle. So
didn't affect your guitar playing.
No, in fact, I had 2 years of recuperation, a couple of surgeries and stuff, and so I had lots of time
practice.
to practice it. It actually improved my guitar playing quite a bit those 2 years. And that was actually the point that I first launched into doing this professionally.
Oh.
Because the job that I had was forced to replace me, after being out for 2 years. And when I was finally through all the physical therapy and had fully healed and the unemployment insurance had run out, I made the leap.
Been making records for about 30 years now. Your first cassette to your first CD has been about 30 years.
Yep.
When did you actually launch? Were you in your 20s at that point?
I was 32 when I first started touring, and I was 35 when I put out my first CD.
That's a little late for most people.
It is, but it was because of that transition from piano to guitar at the age of 19, and I told myself it was going to be about 10 years, and I just decided if I worked this hard every day at it, because I was seeing measurable improvement. And so I just figured if I continue and I keep seeing more and more improvement, it's probably going to be about 10 years. Because it wasn't just a matter of the guitar skills. It was also wanting to not try to launch a professional career until I felt like I had 2 full sets of songs that I believed in, that I thought were strong enough, because you only get one chance to make a first impression, and I've seen way too many people go out there with one really good song,
and that's it.
Yeah. And I didn't want to be that guy, and so, I think in hindsight that served me really well, because when I did start doing this, apparently I made some good first impressions, and things went well for me.
Got a pretty good record deal on the right label, the right kind of label for you, for sure, to be exposed to the right audience, the right radio audience. Yeah. So You got lucky.
I got very lucky.
I'm glad you did, because I really have enjoyed your career, and glad that we've had a chance to visit a couple of times. Continuing to think about your background in Philly, and I'm thinking about the music scene that you probably heard growing up, which would have been the Philly sound. Patti LaBelle, Harold Melvin, Billy Paul, OJ's, and then eventually like Hall & Oates.
Well, peripherally.
Yeah.
You know what? I was around people that listened to that music, and I liked it, but it wasn't what I gravitated towards. Funny enough, my grandfather was in the auto upholstery business, and this was back in the day where, you know, old Jewish businessmen did favors for each other instead of taking money. You know, if the guy who owned the men's clothing store needed upholstery done on his car, my grandfather would do it for nothing. And then when my grandfather needed a suit or a shirt, they'd take care of each other.
Barter.
So I used to spend a lot of time down at my grandfather's upholstery place, and anyway, that was the music that was blaring in the background. But he had a friend who was an executive or something with Columbia Records, or a salesman, and that friend always carried around promotional copies of albums that were on Columbia Records, and he would give my grandfather a box every time he saw him, and my grandfather would give them to the grandkids. And the music given to me at the age of 7 and 8 and 9 was Bob Dylan and Paul Simon and, you know, some other stuff, Chicago and Earth, Wind and Fire. But for some strange reason, Bob Dylan captured this little 7-year-old me, and I used to fall asleep every night listening to that one particular side of Bob Dylan's Greatest Hits Volume 2 with Stuck Inside a Mobile and the Memphis Blues again. That's my all-time favorite Dylan song, and I used to go to sleep to that every night as a kid, and I suppose I just absorbed and soaked up that style of music, those kinds of sounds, and probably that was the biggest influence on my musical direction, but all subconsciously.
It wasn't the sounds of the cities. It was the sound of what you were being given, essentially, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Grandpa.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully he can hear us. Would you like to do another song from the new record?
Yeah.
Continue talking in a bit, but I don't want to go too long without another song.
Yeah.
Which one are we doing? Which one are you doing? I'm not doing anything.
Well, this is a song about changing people's minds.
After 3 or 4 tries, I poked out his eyes. That's how I got him to see. To get him to hear, I screamed in his ear. I gave him the 3rd degree. I sharply berated him. I told him I hated him. I wasn't very kind. I shouted and cussed until I won his trust, and that's how I changed his mind. I shunned him, ignored him, I wouldn't look toward him. I only would give him my back. I accused him of lies I would not compromise. I erased him after the fact. I was abrupt, I would often interrupt. We were volatile when combined. And in stating my case, I blew up in his face. And that's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. I blamed him, shamed him, insulted and inflamed him. That's how I changed his mind. Now this man was an ass. I was gonna let him pass, let him take a wide berth of me. But I was right and he was wrong, like I was telling him all along, trying to just get him to see. But he's a this and I'm a that, so we couldn't have a chat of the friendly and civilized kind. Round after round, I just ground him down, and that's how I changed his mind. I stomped on his toes and I punched him in the nose. I was using irony. So sure of the truth, I knocked out his tooth and I kicked him twice in the knee. I won over his heart with a poisonous dart. You should have seen me unwind, being overly cruel and with ridicule. That's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. I blamed him, shamed him, insulted and inflamed him. That's how I changed his mind. And so I called him a fool, challenged him to a duel, threw my white glove in his face. 20 paces and I shot, and I must have hit the spot. Anyway, that's how I pleaded my case. Well, I won in the end, after making him bend, and after all the papers were signed. In the end, I won, yeah, that's how it was done. Well, that's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. I blamed him, shamed him, insulted and inflamed him. That's how I changed his mind. Yes, I blamed him, shamed him, I might have even maimed him. That's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind. That's how I changed his mind.
How I Changed His Mind, music from Chuck Brodsky from his latest release on Acoustic Alternatives from Grove Studios in Ypsilanti. Grove Studios, again, a studio that if you're looking to rent some space, get out of the garage and get into the studio is their motto. And if you're a local musician in the Ann Arbor, Detroit area, it's a great spot, 24/7 available to you to, get and not annoy your neighbors as much as you might if you're playing loud music in your garage. And I can say, sometimes it gets pretty loud in here. So fortunately today we have a quiet environment, and I'm very pleased to have one of the best storytellers I know, Chuck Brodsky, in front of me, talking about his new record, talking about his life, his career. We're going to talk a little bit about about the record in a bit, but I want to do a little bit more history digging and just idea digging. Like, for instance, when you tour, and we talked about this before we started recording, you're solo. You've rarely ever played with other musicians on stage, and that's, I'm sure, how you write the songs. But the records, are fully produced that have bands, and you've gone in with a producer. Do you personally come in with the ideas about the arrangements, about adding the bass and whatever other instrumentation, or do you leave that idea up to the producer?
Well, I do now, because my last 3 albums, I've been the producer.
That I've noticed.
And I worked with some really fine people over the years. My first 3 albums were produced, or my second, third, and fourth albums were produced by Christian Bush from the country super band Sugarland.
I knew him when he was in Billy Pilgrim. I
did too.
Yeah, I didn't know him, but
Christian and I used to be part of 3 or 4 songwriter in the round nights at Eddie's Attic in Atlanta, and he was a really good old friend of mine, and he produced those albums. And then I went up to Nova Scotia, to Cape Breton, and had 3 albums I recorded with an amazing musician, maybe the greatest musician in the entire world, honest to God, named J.P. Cormier. He plays banjo, fiddle, guitar, and mandolin better than anybody I have ever heard play any of those
Why have I not heard of him?
You should look him up. He's also a phenomenal songwriter. He's got lots of his own albums out. Some of them are traditional Cape Breton music. Some of them are his own songs. So he produced those. And, I learned a bit as I went. And then I felt like I was ready. I decided to stay at home and record in my own town with a friend of mine. The studio's not anything elaborate, but he himself has a great musical mind, and we get along so well. We have a lot of fun doing the record, and between the two of us, our own ideas are, and we're always on the same page about stuff, and it's just a lot of fun. I felt like I had learned enough over the years to finally be able to realize my own visions for these songs, because I would just go into the studio before and sing all my songs live and get the 10 or 11 of them down, and then turn the whole thing over to, I'd still be around, I'd be listening to the parts that my producers either were playing themselves or bringing in other musicians to play, but I didn't have the control. And I still think I ended up with some really great sounding records working with these people, but they still weren't the sound that I heard in my head for my own songs. And so since I've started producing my own albums, I've brought piano to the forefront a lot more, and organ. I grew up with a 60s, 70s kind of rock and roll sound, and the singer-songwriters of that era also, they had bands backing them, and so my musical sensibilities probably come out of that Jackson Browne, Bob Dylan era. But I've been influenced by so many other things, bands like Little Feat and, Cajun music and blues and all sorts of rock and roll, and then folk music from Denmark and Irish traditional and Scottish traditional. All of that has affected my musical sensibilities to some degree. And I just realized that I wanted a bit more control. And I wanted to take my time making these records, because when I would work with these producers, we would have to book a block of a week or 10 days, and everything had to be done in that time, including mixing. And nowadays, I record my albums over several months. And during the pandemic, over a full year. And the studio's a 10-minute drive from my house. At the end of the day, I sleep in my own bed. I might not have another session for a week, or maybe 3 weeks or a month, come back. And I really had time to live with the recordings up to each point, and listen to them, and like I said, live with them, and have the time to think about them and decide whether I really liked what I was hearing or not. I never had that luxury in the past. It was all shotgun style. I had a flight coming up in 4 days, and this album has to be done. I have to leave with a finished product.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. The album doesn't have to be done until I feel good about it.
Nobody's pressuring you. It's
no pressure.
all on you.
Yeah. And I just, getting back to what I said before, I just like I like being the one suggesting what instrument is next. And my engineer, I should really call him a co-producer, because we just bat ideas around. He might say, what do you think of bringing in organ here? Or he might say, what do you think about doing this? And he's always right. I love his ideas. And any idea I have, he makes happen. So
good to have somebody like that on your team.
It's fabulous, yeah. I love it.
Well, something that you do better than most, and maybe all, is you really embody the characters that you're singing about. And I don't know, because I don't necessarily know the story behind every song, whether all of your songs are inspired by real people or just some of them. But for instance, you certainly aren't the man in Blow 'Em Away. That's not the kind of person you are. No. But maybe you've experienced something like Warsaw and May through somebody else, and you've been able to tell their story. So as a songwriter in general, are you writing about truth, or are you making stuff up?
Everything I write about is truth, and that's a dedication. That's probably the biggest thing I'm dedicated to doing. Now, truth can be represented in lots of different ways. I do like telling real stories about real people, like they're actual stories, people that truly exist. But sometimes I'll make a composite. And what I am using to illustrate in those songs are facts, things that really did happen, but they may not all have happened to the same individual. It might be a composite of 2 or 3 people's experiences, especially that song, Warsaw in May. It was a composite, but it was mainly based around somebody that I did, in particular, that I did read about, who was the director of the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra, and had been rounded up and put into Auschwitz, and became a member of the camp orchestra. But he also was forced to play for the officers at night in their officers' club. Yeah. So I just find there's enough in real life that is fascinating and powerful and important to tell, that there's really no need to make stuff up. I'm not saying I wouldn't. I'm not saying I couldn't. I'm not saying I haven't. But my preference really is I mean, I get excited about a great story, and I get excited about trying to see if I can come up with a way of telling it,
Yeah.
and boiling it down to what's important to tell about it. And yeah, I really enjoy that. Not all the songs I write are story songs, but a lot of them are. And as you know, a lot of them are baseball story songs.
We're going to get to that. Yes. Yeah. We're almost there. We're on the verge of that very topic right now. I was thinking about that. And the topics that you have covered besides baseball include genetically modified foods, hatred, bigotry, love, and history. But yes, baseball certainly is the one that seems to be what you're possibly best known for. I don't know for sure. I was thinking about something I read in the last week because I was just kind of researching a little bit more history about you, that your first baseball song was kind of a composite song. It was partially based on one particular pitcher, but then in general about washed up pitchers in general.
Yeah.
And then you started to write more specifically about events. And man, you do that. I don't know anybody who does it anywhere near as well as you do. Who else is doing baseball songs? Is Dan Byrne?
Dan Byrne writes great baseball songs. John McCutcheon writes great baseball songs. Lots of people out there write baseball songs. I had no idea. Honestly, I thought when I wrote that first one that people were going to think it was very trite to sing a song about sports, and I was gun shy about doing it. And then over the years, I've discovered that baseball songs is somewhat of a subgenre unto itself.
Yeah.
And there was an entire series of CDs called the Diamond Cuts collection.
I bought them all.
I think they got 11 or 12 volumes of them, and they were compilation albums of artists from all sorts of genres who had baseball songs. And Dan Byrne and myself had songs on all of those various Diamond Cut CDs, but people as diverse as Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan and George Winston and, oh my God, I could go on and on and on, have baseball songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I've, met all sorts of people who are not so famous that have great baseball songs. And I never really intended to do this. I wrote, that first one, Lefty, I just wrote personally to for a friend that I grew up with, and we both really loved this one pitcher who was washed up and tried to hang on too long. And I just thought, I didn't even think I was going to play that publicly. I just thought he'd think it was cool that I wrote this song.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, I played it at a campfire, and people really liked it and encouraged me to play it. And then I wrote that next one, Letters in the Dirt, for my dad. Oh, no, that came later. The Ballad of Eddie Clapp was the first historical baseball song I wrote, and I actually intended to write that song about Jackie Robinson.
Hmm.
And I went to, remember the old Borders Books chain? I went to
Yeah,
the Borders
they were
Books.
based in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Well, they had a branch near my parents in Philadelphia. When I was visiting, I went over there hoping I'd find a book on Jackie Robinson, and I did. I started to thumb through it, and somehow I landed on a page with a one-sentence footnote about this guy, Eddie Clapp, who was the first white man to play in the Negro Leagues. And I realized, well, that's the story I want to tell.
Because no one has really told that story.
And that led to my first, doing my first bit of research for songwriting ever, because I was writing about something historical. And I just got really turned on to this. I really enjoyed the whole process of researching and deciding what's important here, making some footnotes, and then trying to weave that into verse and song. And, realizing I liked doing that, I kept at it. But it really wasn't until the third or fourth baseball song that I even had the slightest inkling that I might continue writing them and try to go for having an entire album of them. And now I have two.
Yeah.
And a third one is hopefully soon on the way. And
Yay.
why not? That was just my thinking about it all along. Why not? Maybe nobody's ever done this before, and how cool would it be to be the first guy to ever put out 3 albums of all baseball songs?
It's a great way to tell the stories because, you learn well from a song because you can hear it in your head, and it's a great way to learn history, period. For me, being a baseball fan as well, I didn't know some of these stories. I certainly wouldn't have known until I read that you spelled Klepp wrong. I didn't know the guy's story at all. But, Now I do. Now, because of you exposing me to stories like that, I mean, I may have heard at some point while I was collecting baseball cards as a kid, the song that is, well, we all have like a starting point for when you fall in love with an artist, or your first introduction to them is something. I don't specifically remember when or where it was, but I know it was Doc Ellis's No No. I know that was the open door to finding your music, whether it was one of the baseball collections or just hearing the songs on something else. But that was like what a fascinating story. I don't know if I knew that. So I continued to follow what you were doing from there. And it doesn't have to be a baseball song for me to enjoy it, but those tend to be my favorites on your record because I too am a fan. So it's intriguing how you can always dig up something. And I'll tell you, because I bought these last 2 albums of yours at the same time. I ordered them from your website and you sent them to me. And I listened to, even though I'd already heard this one, because I was the folk music director at a college radio station where we got a copy sent to us, I re-listened to it first because I remember really liking this. And I will tell you again, face to face, of all your records, this is numerically my favorite album. I rate each song on a 1 to 10 scale, and I don't find that very often that somebody 30 years into their career releases my favorite album of their career. So far, this is it.
Thank you.
But I'm thinking while I'm listening to this record, and I get to the 2 baseball songs on this record going, boy, he really should write something about the almost no-hitter that Armando Galarraga had. And then I get to this album, and there it is. And he decides not to use Armando as the key focus of the song because it's probably hard to rhyme Galarraga with something, but not so hard to rhyme Jim Joyce and tell his story. But again, you told a completely different side of the story that most people would not think about, and you just do that brilliantly. I don't know. There's not really a question here. It's just a wow moment for me. Like, how does he do that? He comes up with a great way to tell the stories.
Well, it occurred to me just that Jim Joyce's emotions in that situation and what he did in the aftermath was really the story. I mean, sure, a guy being 1 out away from a perfect game and in hindsight, being cheated out of that perfect game.
And knowing
instant
he
replay
was.
shows that it should have been a perfect game, but it predated when instant replay was allowed to overturn calls. And
we here in Detroit are familiar with that.
yeah, so it's a very unfortunate thing for the pitcher.
Yeah.
But I thought it was even more unfortunate for the umpire. And then he handled it with such grace that I thought, wow, this is a story that has to be told. And yeah, it's one of my favorite baseball songs, actually, because of that, because of what it is. The guy screwed up royally and
Owned it.
cried about it and owned it immediately. And what happened the next day was so beautiful, where the Tigers manager sent Galarraga out to deliver the lineup to the umpire, and they had an embrace right there at home plate before the game. That's powerful.
Yeah, it was.
And you know what? As a songwriter, I guess what I'm really looking to do is to do what hasn't been done. Because the "Oh, My Baby Left Me" or "I'm So in Love with You" or those kinds of songs, I don't knock them. I don't knock anybody for writing them. But probably 90% of all the songs out there are love songs. And they've been done, and I never felt like I could write the ultimate love song that was going to rise above the pack of millions of love songs, and so it just never really interested me to try. I wanted to find things to write about that maybe had not been written about yet. And I guess it's feels like it served me well, because my interest level in my own material is still there, and I probably would have lost it singing, those "My Baby Left Me" songs, or "I Love My Baby So Much."
Well, maybe your best one in that category is "We Are Each Other's Angels," because it's just a universal thing. It's not a love song to one person. It's a universal love song.
Yeah.
So we were just talking baseball songs, and there are 2 on the new album. Did you plan to play one of those?
I didn't, but I could.
Sorry. It seems like a good time to squeeze another song in, and it fits with what we were just chatting about.
I'll just need to retune a little, but I can give a little backdrop
Great.
to this song while I do it. It's about a career minor league baseball player whose name was Brian Mazzone. And Brian pitched, he changed teams over 20 times during his minor league career, his 10 or 11 year minor league career, maybe it was 12 years. Pitched all over the world, pitched in Mexico, Venezuela, all over the U.S., pitched in Canada, pitched in Korea. And at the age of 31, he was in the Philadelphia Phillies farm system with their AAA club. One of the major league pitchers had a sore arm and had to miss a scheduled start, and so they called Brian Mazzone up to fill in for a spot start. And that is called getting a cup of coffee. A little taste of the major leagues. You're not going to stay, you're not there for good, but you get to taste the major leagues. So that's called a cup of coffee. And this is what happened that day.
There was orange on the radar. In some places it was red. You saw it on the TV while you was still in bed. Room service brought him breakfast, some good coffee as well. And he could get used to staying at a major league hotel. Well, it was raining hard that morning, and the whole day would pour. And he would just stare out the window from the 27th floor. The night before at supper, some joint in Buffalo, skipper called to tell him that he was going to the show. Text messages and emails were blowing up his phone from all his friends and family, from everyone he'd ever known. His folks flew in from Boston, and his wife just made her flight. They all got there the next day to see him pitch that night. And so he put his big league pants on, and he tied his big league shoes, while a couple of big leaguers were giving interviews. His name was in the lineup, and he was mentioned on the news. He'd knocked around a dozen years for this. He'd even pitched in Veracruz. And so he walked out through that tunnel to stand on a big league mound. His tears mixed with the raindrops, and he felt like he might drown. He squeezed the big league baseball, ran his fingers along the seams. The rain was cruel and stung him as it washed away his dreams. I was flooded in the dugout. It was a lonely place to sit. He thought of going to Korea, or maybe it was time to quit. And how next time they need a pitcher, they'll probably call up some kid. And every time thereafter, that's exactly what they did. Well, now you can say that's baseball, especially if you never played. But for the guy who worked his ass off, whose dues were overpaid. This was all they'd ever wanted, ever since the 7th grade. Congratulations were in order, and condolences were paid. Oh, that tarp was never lifted, and that storm never let up. It's like he got his cup of coffee without the coffee cup. They let him keep his jersey, and they boxed it soaking wet. And that was as close to the majors as he would ever get. No, that tarp was never lifted, and that storm never let up. It's like he got his cup of coffee without the coffee cup.
Beautifully told sad story there from Chuck Brodsky's latest record, Cup of Coffee, on Acoustic Alternatives. Chuck's music is not the kind of music that you have as background music. It is definitely pay attention to the stories and the lyrics, and it's a very enjoyable experience every time, I got to say. And you know what? Maybe this is a tagline for your website, but making history rhyme is what you do. I mean,
awesome.
Really, because you do. I mean, I don't know how you can take a song, a story that you can't really change the story if you're going to tell the truth. But you make it rhyme and you make it work, and that can't be that easy. How long does it take you to write a song like that? I mean, you have the guts are all there. You just have to put it together, right?
Well, it varies every time, and it could take days, and it could take weeks, and it could take months, and it could take years. Honestly, it's not. No song is ever finished until it's ready, until it's really there.
Yeah.
And my standards, my bar has. I've raised my bar over the years, and so I won't settle for something I might have settled for as finished years ago. And I have the drive to see it through because I have had the experiences of what that reward is like, to put in all the work that it might take instead of some of the work that it might take to reach that point. And so I don't care if it takes me years or decades, and I literally have had it take 2 decades with one song.
Yikes.
It was an idea that was really important to me. I didn't get anywhere with it. I took it out a few times over the years, got nowhere. And then one day it clicked, and it's just how it works. I could just as easily sit down and have an entire song come out of me in a sitting, but probably what I would do in that case is step away from it for 3 or 4 or 5 days, come back, look at it with fresh eyes. And in most cases, I'd start looking for ways to make it better and see if there's anything in there that might bug me a little bit.
What song was it that took so long?
I would have to think. On the spot right now, I can't really remember. But it's very important to me that everything in all my lyrics sound conversational. That they work on that level. That when you read them on a page, the accent falls where it should. And sometimes that really involves, to get that to happen, it might involve replacing one word in that line. Maybe replace a 2-syllable word with a 1-syllable word, and then everything after that falls better into place. But really, lyrics are very syncopated in my mind. I hear that syncopation, and that's one of the things that really draws me to writing. I really like the syncopation of the phrasing and playing around with that. So when I'm writing the lyrics, I'm hearing that bump, ba bump, ba 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 bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, and everything has to fall into that.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, if it's awkward, if there's anything jarring, it needs to be repaired. And that can be by substituting words, with more syllables or less or fewer syllables to affect the rest of the sentence. Very subtle things, but that's where my joy as a writer is now after all these years of writing. It's in the subtle things. It's, in my opinion, what makes a pretty good song really good. Getting those little details taken care of. Mm-hmm. And that's where the fun is now for me as a writer. It's the little details and the little bits of polish that I can put on it to take it a little bit beyond where I might have taken it 10 years ago as a songwriter.
Has Major League Baseball been providing you with all of these details to these obscure stories? I mean, where are you getting the details?
You come across them in real life, and fans of mine send stories to me, and you just never know. But I did have a really fantastic alliance with the director of research at the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. But that predated Google becoming so prevalent. And now I don't really need his help anymore. He's still a good friend. He's moved on. He's not in the same position anymore. But I don't really need to call on the Baseball Hall of Fame research department like I did when I first started. And fortunately, this fella who used to be in that position was a big folk music fan and really was into helping me. So if I called him up and asked him, do you have anything in the files about this fella? He'd call me back. He'd spend an hour looking, and he'd call me back and said, yeah, I've just Xeroxed you 40 pages, and I'll put it in the mail tomorrow.
Wow.
Whatever articles they had on hand. He was a tremendous ally. But then, it became possible to do your own research, and I don't need to call on anybody anymore.
I know you've played there, so that must be a pretty cool thing as a fan to have been
and they
involved.
gave me a lifetime pass.
Nice.
That's just so fun. It's so fun to show that pass and walk into the Hall of Fame. I don't want to pay.
Yeah. As a fellow baseball fan, I have to ask you, do you prefer listening on the radio or watching it on TV?
I love both. I love the romanticism of listening to it on the radio, and Shirley grew up listening to games on the radio. But I suppose my preference would be now to watch it on TV just because of all the different angles, the camera angles they can show you of the play, and I like to see it. I like to see the visual side of it.
I do like to see it, but I have to say our radio play-by-play current, not the color guy, because Jim Price is a little dull. Sorry, Jim. But Dan Dickerson just paints the picture for me so well. I don't really need the TV.
Yeah.
He does such a great job.
As a kid, I used to tune into Ernie Harwell.
Yeah, Ernie was great too.
I could get, from Philadelphia, I could get the Detroit station, I could get Chicago, I could get St. Louis, I could get New York. So as a little kid, I used to, whatever game I could get would be what I'd fall asleep listening to, and certainly listen to Ernie.
Yeah, he's a legend. What's the favorite baseball song that you didn't write that you've ever heard? Tough question.
That's a really good question. I don't know that I'm prepared to answer that.
Okay.
I mean, I would like to have an answer for you, but there's too much to consider.
You can always email me that.
Okay. I mean, I think Dan Byrne has written some really great baseball songs. Actually, some of the best baseball songs I've ever heard were by people that aren't professional musicians. They don't do this for a living, and they show up at a folk festival and they sing this song around a campfire, and it's incredible. This is what's for real out there. I go to the Kerrville Folk Festival every year down in Texas and sit around campfires with people that show up with their songs, and they don't do this for a living, but they bring these incredible songs, and some of the best songs I've ever heard in my life were by people that are not professional. So I would imagine a baseball song or two from folks like that could very well be up there.
Okay. Just curious.
I'm not very much into commercial music or pop music, and so There are people that write baseball songs in those genres, and they don't do much for me. I'm really looking for the quirky, folky storyteller.
Yeah. I consider you a baseball historian because you're giving me history lessons, and maybe you don't consider yourself one, but perhaps one of your future projects when maybe you'll never run out of ideas, but to chronicle they don't do them as much anymore, but back in the day they used to have songs for the teams like, we're all behind our baseball team, go get 'em Tigers. It was one I remember hearing as a kid. Like, there's got to be a ton of those kinds of songs out there.
But I hate that stuff.
Well, I know, but it'd still be nice to collect them. They're not the best songs in the world, but it might be nice to just have, as a historian of sorts, to collect them on even if it's digital, just like put them all in one spot.
I hereby pass that task on to you.
Thanks.
Actually, really, those kinds of songs...
Too cheesy for you.
Yeah, I can't stand them. I mean, they serve their purpose in the day, but if somebody were to write one of them now...
They don't do them anymore.
I would hate it. I would absolutely hate it. I would just say, this is garbage. It's cheesy. You're not... But...
The fact that I still remember the melody of the one from the 70s from the Tigers, that says something, though. I mean, it's stuck in my head.
You know what the beautiful thing is? It's totally subjective, and everybody's taste is valid. And I'm only expressing mine, but, who am I to say? I just have my taste and my preferences, and all those songs are fine if you like them.
Well, you've been doing this a long time, and I know that when you do live shows, people in listening room environments tend to be chatty sometimes. Do people ever shout out songs you don't remember anymore of your own music? Does that happen?
Occasionally, but I think people would more often than not approach me privately before the show to ask me, or during the break to ask me if I could play a particular song. I do get people calling out songs, and by then it's usually too late because I've got a set list designed, and I know what I want to play. I've kind of given it a lot of thought, and I don't want to leave out any of these songs, and if I add one, I have to cut one. Occasionally, there are times I get asked to play a song I can't remember, but the pandemic forced me to, because I was live streaming
we dug deeper
every week, and I just sort of made a personal commitment that I didn't want to play any song more frequently than once every 4 or 5 weeks, and that caused me to go back and relearn a lot of my older songs, so that was good for me.
Something good came out of the pandemic then.
A lot of good things came out of the pandemic for me. Yeah.
Good. I don't think this probably happens to you much anymore, but because you tend to play listening rooms. But do you ever have to play where you're not the primary source of, like, are people talking in the background? And when that happens, is it hard to sing story songs when people are talking around you? Because
it's terribly hard, and honestly, I just wouldn't do it. I would be careful not to put myself in that situation. And I've been very lucky since I started. I really stayed clear of the bar gigs because bar gigs wouldn't be right for me, and I would be lost in that situation, and I would have lost my heart. It would have broken me. So I knew I needed to play listening rooms, and sure, it's a different situation because when you play bar gigs, you can get a regular gig every week or a couple nights a week, and you'll have to play cover songs and stuff. But the audience will be there. The bar will be full every time. If you are a singer-songwriter just starting out, getting on the road, you're going into towns that no one's ever heard of you.
Yeah.
Time and time and time and time again. And you build your audience literally in ones and twos. And the next time you come back, hopefully there'll be 5 or 10 more people than the last time. And over the course of 30 years, if you're lucky, you get to watch it build even better, further. But as long as it could be a sustainable thing, then it was something I could keep believing in and see better days down the road. So I kept at it. But I would have had my soul crushed had I not been absolutely adamant about keeping myself out of the wrong places. And sure, there were a few times over the course of my career where maybe I didn't realize what the circumstances would be like at at a particular gig, and it was that way, and it wasn't fun, and it was kind of like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not in this for the money. I'm trying to make a living, yes, but I have never and will never do anything strictly for money. If I don't believe in it, if it's not something that I think I'll enjoy, sure, I guess I'll make an exception if I'm desperate financially. But by and large, I want to keep my spirit going. I don't want to get broken. And I'm really fortunate. I have seen people get broken by playing the wrong gigs and lose their love of music and their passion for doing this. And it was always in the very front of my mind to protect that at all costs, even if it meant making less money in the beginning, or even now. Money was never the object, as long as I could survive. And I've been very fortunate for 30 years to survive.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I asked the question because I was at a show earlier this week where the opening act, I think they were called the A's for Marcus Mumford's tour, were an old-timey folk band, duo.
They weren't the Flying A's, were they?
I don't remember. Two youngish girls, I think. Anyway, the audience was, some of them paying attention to them and some of them not. And their music was very much like, listen to it, it's kind of quiet and there's delicate harmonies. And I thought, you worked with Christian Bush. What if he decided to say, hey, Sugarland's going on tour. Would you like to open for us? They would probably not pay attention to you, not all of them. Some of them would. They'd be like, oh, what's this? But it would be a situation just like that, where you'd be exposed to an audience that, Christian's like, hey, come on out. I'd love to expose my audience to you. And you might say yes, but you might say no, because the reason you'd say no is exactly the reason you gave me. It's because you don't want to be playing in a bar where people aren't paying attention. And that's essentially what these arenas would be. It'd be thousands and thousands of people and half of them paying attention and half of them having conversations, not giving a care about you, which would be really kind of annoying. And I felt so bad for those girls because I wanted to hear them. But so many people around me were blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, not the right environment for these young ladies, but there it is.
But, to be perfectly honest, every situation is unique, and I would have to approach each one differently. So I can't rule out ever playing in a situation where I would know ahead of time that not everybody's going to be listening to me. There could be something really positive in that experience that I might be able to see ahead of time. It'll be worth putting up with that for this.
Yeah.
So
might gain some new fans, might be worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make sure that when I get out there, I have my best chances of succeeding. So it's just like sports, You don't put your relief pitcher in the wrong situation where he's not going to have much of a chance to succeed in any situation in life. So
fair
that's
enough.
how I approach music. I'm fortunate to be able to play within a genre where just about all the gigs are listening gigs.
For sure.
It might only be to 20 people or 25 or 30 or 35 people, but they're all there for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. And, I can still make a decent living doing that, and at least enough to pay the bills. And that's all that matters.
Before we get to the last song, I want to talk about one more topic. It's your trips that you take to Ireland and Scotland. And tell me a little bit about those. And I know there's one coming up. Tell me a bit about how those started. Like, why did you start doing that? Taking people on trips with you.
Well, my first exposure to Ireland was piggybacking on a friend's tour of gigs around 1998 or 1999. And I fell in love with Ireland and booked a second tour for myself on my own. And a really good booking agent came to one of those shows and offered to take over, so he did. And all in all, I went over there 17 times to play gigs and drive myself around and explore. And I have completely fallen in love with Ireland and absorbed a lot from there. And then, sadly, my booking agent passed away. And it's such a thankless job. There's so little money in it for booking agents. No one wants to do it. I couldn't find another that could really plug me into the same kinds of gigs. But at the same time, a fellow singer-songwriter friend of mine from Wisconsin named John Smith, who you may know.
I know his music. I don't know him personally.
John started doing these little tours for his own fans with a partner in Ireland, and they started out small, maybe 10 people at a time, and they were great. And they realized they had something, and then they met somebody who owned their own bus and brought him on board, and were able to take 23 people instead of 10. And at that time, John started to ask some of his other songwriter friends whether they might be interested in leading these tours for their own fans as well through the company. And he reached out to me, and they have gone really well for me. You know, the fact that I had been there 17 times before and spent, 2 weeks on each trip, so I really had spent a lot of time in Ireland. I'd made a lot of friends there, and I knew the country. So it was easy for me to talk up the tours to my fans at my gigs. And once I started doing it, I get paid well, and I get to go back to Ireland I do 2 tours every summer there now. Each tour is 10 days long, and one group comes in, and they'll go home, and 2 or 3 days later, the second group will come, and we'll do a different itinerary. The tours are absolutely fabulous, and I've done 22 of them at this point.
Wow.
And I love them every bit as much as I did when we first started. They are incredible. These folks that run this company have honed things down to where everything about the tour is great. The places they stay, the musicians that play for us, the daytime stops. Everything about it is great. And so that's the Ireland tours. I have a friend who also lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where I live, and she has been leading historical tours and spiritual journey tours to Scotland for the last 20 years. And it occurred to her, I've been doing these Ireland tours, musical tours, and she wondered if I might be interested in teaming up with her to do the same thing in Scotland. Well, I had already been secretly wishing I might be able to find somebody to work with to do that very thing. And this fell in my lap.
Nice.
And we planned this out, and we were all set to launch in April of 2020. So
What happened? I can't remember.
we postponed it, but in April of 2022, we did our first 2 tours, and they were incredible, just like the Ireland tours.
Great.
We did a 3rd one in September. Next year, we are expanding. We're bringing in 3 or 4 other songwriters to lead their own tours, and hopefully by the following year, we'll have a few more songwriters doing this.
Cool.
It's a joy, to get to go overseas like that, especially to another English-speaking country where this type of music and songwriting is part of their own tradition. I seem to fit in well, and it's a great joy to turn other people on to the same things that I have fallen in love with about Ireland. Scotland's pretty new to me, so I can't say that I'm really turning people on to the things that I love about Scotland. Not so much as my partner in this can. So we're going to places more or less that she loves.
Sure.
And she's wonderful. I trust her implicitly about everything. And
Cool.
so there you have it. If anybody's interested in going on any of my tours, I have just a few rooms available for either of the 2 tours to Ireland next summer. But I just put up my 2024 dates on my website. My Scotland tours are sold out for 2023, but I should have dates for 2024 very soon.
Okay.
So just, keep an eye on it if anybody out there is interested. Chuck at chuckbrodsky.com.
Yeah. Nice.
Brodsky with a Y.
And all the places you've been in the world, how did you end up in Asheville? Why did you move from Philly to Asheville? What took you there? What's so good about Asheville? I'm not trying to put it down. I'm just wondering.
Well, there was a 15-year period in between where I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
And that's where I first started touring from, and it was far from everywhere. And then David Wilcox,
Yes.
who has been based in Asheville for many years. We met at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, I think in 1993, and David started to play my song Blow 'Em Away. And then he invited me to open for him in Asheville. So I took him up on the offer, and I really loved the mountains there. I really loved the physical beauty. I loved the character of the town at the time, especially. I also had probably a dozen friends already living there that I knew through the Kerrville Folk Festival. And the other factor was that Asheville is a day's drive from my parents in Philadelphia, as opposed to needing to catch a flight. And if, in an emergency, I could get there. So, and then one more factor was just geographically, I looked at where Asheville was, and as a hub to go out to different regions, I could be a lot of different places in one 10-hour drive.
That's a brilliant move.
Yeah, it really was, and I'm very happy there.
Chuck Brodsky's been my guest today on Acoustic Alternatives. The new album is called Gravity, Wings, and Heavy Things, and I think he's probably going to play a song from that, but I'm going to give him a choice to not, because we did talk about the Jim Joyce song, which is fantastic. So I'm going to let you pick. What song would you like to do? Something from here, or maybe that, because we did talk about it, and we might have intrigued people about it. We can also tell them to go find this record called Them and Us.
Well, I'd like to play something from Them and Us, but I'd like to play the title song because I haven't sung the Jim Joyce song.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Long enough that it might be risky to try it lyrically.
Nope.
I might forget the words.
No problem.
There's a standoff all across the Great Divide, with friends and family members on both sides. Someone struck a match, it would combust, scorching everyone, both them and us. It's raining dirty words and disrespect. It's not having any positive effect. The bridges have collapsed because of rust. We can't reach each other, them and us. Got our earplugs in and our blinders on, and we wonder, where have all the flowers gone? Where once there was a garden cool and lush, all that's left here now is them and us. And I've never felt so lonely in this world as I do when all those banners are unfurled and the airwaves are just spewing all that stuff about us and them. Look what it's done to us. Our differences are few and overblown, and this sometimes leads to punches being thrown. But there seems to be a few things to discuss, but you can't say a word to them or us. We write them off for the way they vote, and we write them off 'cause they came on a boat. We turn our backs with contempt and with disgust at every one of them who isn't us. We identify them by the clothes they wear. We identify them by their skin and hair. And we do like them, it's not like us. And I've never felt so lonely in this world as I do when all those banners are unfurled and the airwaves are just spewing all that stuff about us and them. Look what it's done to us. Thoughtful, decent people turning mean. If only all our gods could intervene. But there must be some controls they could adjust. Maybe they could make us whole, them and us. And I've never felt so lonely in this world as I do when all those banners are unfurled and the airwaves are just spewing all that stuff about us and them. Look what it's done to us. There's a standoff all across the Great Divide, with friends and family members on both sides.
Them and Us, the title track from the recent, but not most recent album from Chuck Brodsky. Came out 2018, right? Do I get that date right? Yeah, 2018. And I got to thank you for your time and your storytelling. If people are just finding out about you from this podcast, which is always my goal, obviously I've already sung the praises of the new album, how it's my favorite. But if you want to start somewhere other than this, buy this one and then try 2 sets. It's a great introduction to his old music. It's a live set. It has a lot of funny stories. Stripped down acoustic, much like we had today, but keep exploring beyond there because there's so much to learn from Chuck. Stories and songs and everything. Just thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me in again.
Pleasure.
Thanks for reaching out to me.
A pleasure. I know that at least fans in Michigan can always look forward to a visit in October in the Ann Arbor area. So if you're in this area and you're watching or listening to the podcast, follow that. If you're a musician in the area and you need a place to practice and not to know your neighbors, remember Grove Studios. This is where I'm doing the podcast from. If you're a podcaster, it's another option for you. Check it out at Grove Studios. And then again, Chuck, what a pleasure to see you again. And I hope that we cross paths again soon.
I do too.
Take care.
You too.